Hello, everybody. Yes, I too am very honoured, particularly. I mean, what can you do on these occasions? I'm a boring academic. You're probably all very exciting academics, but I'm a very boring academic, and I'm used to giving incredibly boring, obtuse lectures about the shape of the food system that no one's particularly interested in. But I have really been troubled by this, Helena. I blame you, personally, with a smile on my face. I mean, how do you do justice to this remarkable man? How do you do justice to him? I've actually, the weather's been nice, I've gone part-time, I like to be in my garden, I love my wife, I like a glass of wine at the end of the day, and I spent 2 days writing something which is about 10 minutes worth. This is the sort of effect. He always got under my skin. Always. 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 I was asked to think about public health. I'm a social scientist. I'm a psychologist gone wrong. I became a farmer. I met Aubrey when I was a farmer. And he actually liked me for some reason. When I first met Tim Lobstein and Patty Rundle and people here. We were in the sort of radical new food movement that was growing in Britain, and trying to engage with that food was not just an issue of public health for the poor world, for inequalities, but actually in the heartlands here in the rich West, we were driving it. And yet all of the political attention, all of the policy attention then, less so now, was on the poor world. And Aubrey was part of that thinking that dared to think a bit bigger and say, well, it's the relationship between the rich world and the poor world. It's the gradient, as we now would say. And he encouraged many of us in that. He was part of it. It was his politics, as I'm sure we all know. So I sat, because I'm a note taker, and I've worked it down to sort of 6 big points, I think. It may become 10. 6. He was a role model. Others have said that. I think his personal commitment was important. He wrote my references. I'm someone who writes endless references for people. How boring it is to write references for people. But he did it with great charm. I bet there are many, many people here he wrote references for. This is the hidden mentoring role that he did for so many of us. He disagreed with me. When Tim Lobstein and I were working at the London Food Commission, he was on the board, chaired by Mike Joffe here. Aubrey disagreed with the line, particularly I was interested in, of trying to develop the new adulteration critique, that something is going wrong with the nature of production, the nature of processing, that is affecting public health, affecting the environment. And Aubrey took me to the side once and said, Tim, why are you doing this? Where are the deaths from food poisoning? Not many, compared to heart disease. Don't deviate attention away from that. And I said, Aubrey, give me a break. This is going on, they're connected. This is a really important connection. And he said, go for it. So it wasn't just that he listened to evidence, he was prepared to listen to the argument and give a trust and say, we'll back this lot. He wasn't backing me, he was backing 15 really clever people with multiple degrees and PhDs who was saying we've got to get our teeth into the politics of this. If we really want to address food and public health, we've got to address the new adulteration, not just the NCDs and the indicators as outcome. He was, as I would say, an engaged public intellectual. He dared to speak out. He wasn't just interested in writing in the Lancet. He would go out on the streets and talk publicly, and prepared to speak outwards, not just inwards. And I think that role was actually very, very important, and we need more of that. I'll come to that at the end. He believed evidence should be for the public, not just for the university. Not just evidence in the Lancet, but from the Lancet outside. He believed in science for the people, actually. And that was where I first met him, at BSSRS, the British Society for Social Responsibility in Science. He believed universities shouldn't be ivory towers. They were about the truth and the facts, but for the people. And so that meant that professionally he was political, and that the politics infused his professionalism. He wasn't prepared to see that as something that was different. The elision can be problematic. We know this is not an easy relationship between politics and professionals, or facts and values. But he wasn't prepared to deny that that elision was worth struggling over. And he was prepared to make that very powerful combination. Never give up, work with others, teamwork, teamwork, teamwork is essential. Evidence to values to evidence. A virtuous circle can happen. And as others have said, from Richard onwards, he believed in handing on for the generations. And that's my second point. He saw public health as social movements. And that, I think, is a really important thing, not often said. We talk about public health as the health of the public, obviously, but not as a movement of people who collectively are stronger to articulate and be voices. He was prepared to engage out of normal boundaries. I met him in BSSRS, very august, founded by Nobel Prize winners, Maurice Wilkins, Francis Crick, Julian Huxley, Bertrand Russell, people of that order had founded BSSRS, but it let in young radical PhD students and ex-doctorates like me, and it became a forum for thinking about the nature of the role and the role of science in the late 20th century. Aubrey had a hinterland, not just of politics, we see his art, but of culture. And that, I think, was a very important issue for him, for public health as a movement. You don't just stay working with people due to facts. You stay working with people because you like working with them. They're nice people. Even when you fall out with them, they're worth falling out with. That's a movement. He was in the Politics of Health group under BSSRS. I was in the Agri-Capital group looking at supply. And that tension certainly has affected my life for the rest of it. The relationship between production, processing, distribution, and now this vast empire of catering, shaping what people eat, delivering food without them knowing what's in it, without labels, and so on. This is the new politics of food and health that Aubrey saw as so important. I met him in Nicholas Road in the East End, when Helena, you and he, I can visualize you both walking through the door of this squat, very elegant squat, I should say, a Georgian house. But it was cheap, dirty, fairly squalid. My friend Charlie Clutterbuck lived there. And you walked in, you were doing the Sweet Nothings report at the time, which opened up the forays of this post-Yudkin. Post-Yudkin. This was a very wonderful way to meet you and him. Third point, Aubrey, I think, helped me see that science is for social change, but also the social change changes science. He was part of the post-Second World War radical science movement that dared to question the politics of science of the banals, who saw it as use and abuse, but said we need to unpick the values in the science, what frames the questions that science is asking. Unpicking the embedded assumptions is what I think he was very, very good at. Very charming in that laser-like way of saying, what are we talking about this for? And why? And how? Argument and evidence should inform policy. Yes, we've heard it already. But the point of science is also to question policy. Question policy. Fourthly, I think he raised the issue about what do we mean by public health at all. Obviously, it means the health of the public, but there are many traditions of what is meant. Trying to argue with him, I've spent 25 years trying to think about that and unpick the different traditions in the modern world of what we mean by public health. The engineering, the techno-economic development, the biomedical, the cultural model, and the one that I work on, the ecological or environmental underpinnings of health. All of these you can see in Aubrey's own work, but all of those he was prepared to give a critical assessment of. He knew that public health was highly political. It's a matter of power. That's what we mean by the word politics. It's the Greek for it. It's about distribution of resources, infrastructure. But above all, he taught me what I now think, that public health is about changing the conditions to enable good health for all. He asked, as we know, big ifs. What happens if dentists get paid for unnecessary invasion? His critique of trenching. I have to say, my wife, we lived in the northwest of England. She was about to have her teeth filled, or a tooth filled, and she mentioned the word Aubrey Sheiham, and immediately a poignancy developed in the relationship between the dentist and her. You know Aubrey Sheiham, etc. It was fabulous. Anyway, she got great respect in her treatment from that moment on. He argued that public health is about the prevention of ill health, prevention of the causes of ill health. But he represents modern public health in that it's not something at the local level. It's something at the local through to the global level. And this complexity of multi-level public health is something, as we've heard, to which he contributed. The fifth point, and this is what I really struggled with at the end of yesterday. How can you summarize a life, Helena? I mean, you who knew him, who loved him, as we did, but you especially. When a person dies, my father-in-law, who read precisely 3 books in his life, he said, when a person dies, a library goes with them. That's a lovely phrase. And there's a sense in which that's absolutely true, even though he wrote, 493.4 articles or whatever. You know, actually, it's what's in our heads that matters. It's that notion of the library. He, I think, disproved the view that many hold today, that one can't be a public intellectual. He was clear about values. He was anti the neoliberalism of the modern dominant politics. He saw UCL as a bastion of rationality, you know, the Benthamite tradition. The origins of UCL was that. He saw also science as progress. He saw and believed and bear witness to it. I exemplify it. I'm only 10 years younger than him, 10 and a half years younger than him. But there was an element of friendship and equality, but also generational difference. He believed in handing on down the generation, and not just in personal contact, but eye contact. So for me, the key thing about Aubrey was that he was a public intellectual, actually. I really think that was an element of his public health work that we underestimate. And at a time when we have neoliberalism in power, when Britain is about to be taken out of the European Union, unless we vote, unless young people come out in their droves, and the clock gets rolled back into worse politics even than the mess we have already. I think we need more public intellectuals like Aubrey, who will give the case for the public good, that public health is about the health of the public. So I see him as a public intellectual who disproves the case put by Posner in his book, which dentists don't read but should read, that the public intellectual has declined, a famous book 12 years ago in Public Policy famous. That there's no point actually speaking as academics in public. I think Aubrey showed there was a point of speaking in public and being public, engaging with the public and working in and with and for social movements, let alone funding them and helping nurture them. I think we need more of this approach, more Aubreys, more preparedness to speak up and speak out. This is actually about the Enlightenment. We had the Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment, 250 years ago. UCL founded in the voice and the name of Enlightenment. Rationalism, anti-religion, for rationality, for science. This is a very, very powerful message currently on the back foot, globally, I mean, but also on the back foot here in Britain. In the realities of today, where migration is dominating British politics, where migration is likely to break up the European Union if the vote on June the 23rd goes the wrong way, in my view, we need more Aubreys. We need more preparedness to think about the young, to think about not just the massive inequalities, but also the links to climate change, to biodiversity loss, and the role of people as a species in a society which is currently wrecking all of it. Good for Aubrey. That's it.